Okay, so everyone has to put down their cell phones because we're live on air again. George, who's tweeting, Matt, who was tweeting, and myself, Stephen Downs, and that's it. Currently 0 viewers, but we're used to that. And this is Moonshot Part 3, the informal discussion Part 2. All right. So
we, I guess what I'd like to see us do is play around with a few ideas still. We didn't really get anywhere precise. I mean, we can spend tomorrow trying to get somewhere precise in terms of next steps and things like that. So I think what I'd like to see us do is spend a bit of time, throwing around a few ideas here, and then from there, try and dive into what it is that we think are gaps or what's needed education and so on. So that's about it.
All right. Do we want to work from the Moonshot board?
We could.
Seeing as you guys put it all together.
Yeah, well, we were playing around with, I mean, it's so hard to say, moonshot. First of all, it's a horrible buzzwordy term.
It is.
But it is still something that captures the attention of some people because it means something to some members of society. And basically that, a few things we were thinking about is what would be, you've got Facebook comes along and says we're going to give all people in Africa internet access.
Yeah.
And we'll do that by having, doing it with balloons in the stratosphere and beam internet access down. And so that's the kind of thing in education we often talk more iterative and less so frequently like a big idea.
Yeah.
So we were just thinking like what would it be? And it's hard to think of a moonshot because so many of these ideas, even up here, they're so mundane.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah. Like it's, the idea of free education for all. Like on the one hand, it is a really mundane kind of a thing. If we were able to do it, that would be massive in terms of society. So I don't know. So I'd be interested to hear. So I'll just read them out for people online who can't see them. So here's a few. Again, it was just us trying to get a few ideas down. But free education for all, access to all, socially engaged learning, one-on-one tutoring. This is something that addresses the 2 sigma difference that Bloom's wrote about in terms of the benefit of tutor support. 100% completion rates, data-centric student pipeline, assessment that moves to non-testing, new higher education model, the idea of computed curriculum, 100% employment on graduation, moving to a complexity model, simple, sexy, provocative. That was thrown in there really to say that the idea has to be communicated in a way that people understand. And then we looked at the idea of returning to a focus on human learning rather than just machine learning. And then there's something you talked about as well, Stephen, but the entrepreneurial mindset to learning.
Yeah.
So those were a few things that we were thinking of. But if you were to do a moonshot for learning or education, Stephen, what would you say?
What would I say? That's right. I'd create a system that you don't have to mess around with cameras. I've always talked. There we go. I've always talked about learning technology and learning resources as ubiquitous, always there learning. And so that would be my moonshot if I had to pick one, right? So like one of my favorite examples is the fishing rod that teaches you how to fish.
Yeah.
I use that one lots. And now there actually is a tennis racket that teaches you how to play tennis. And there are various devices that are being released, distributed now, provide feedback and real-time analytics and all of that. So we're sort of entering into that world, but nobody really thinks of it from a learning perspective. But really, we should. There was a product, what's the guy's name? I've forgotten his name. The guy in New Brunswick. He's actually a pretty smart guy. I wish I could remember his name to give him proper credit. But he founded a company called Zaptop. And so it was a bit conservative, but the idea was that you would take your phone, go to the grocery store, scan the product. I'm making use of the video here.
That's exceptional.
It's exceptional. Scan the product, and then you get information about the product. And what's really important, I'm not sure if this was included as part of Zaptop or not, but what's really important is you wouldn't just get product information from the people who made the product, but you get product information from the net generally. So it'd be a distributed source of content. And I think that's the thing. Like we talk about, putting learning in the product. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, it'll just be part of the product, right? But I think we want, as I talked about in the talk, right? The whole idea of using syndication to provide this.
Yeah.
So.
Now, how would you? So it's one of the things that's interesting. Syndication. A lot of stuff you've done is syndication. I'm still trying to get at that. Look, I'd like an idea that's a simple cover all of Africa with internet access with freaking balloons in the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that on the one hand sounds extremely mundane.
Yeah.
Cover all of Africa with internet access. That's like, yeah, a lot of people want to be good people. With internet access with balloons from the stratosphere. So you've got two parts here. You've got the one hand, the simple idea that we all have. On the other hand, you've got the holy bags of animal feces.
Yeah.
That is interesting way of looking at a problem.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
So
that's why I'm wondering from your end, if you're talking about these tools and these, whatever else that what's the vision that we have, like the device that teaches you, the internet infrastructure that helps to communicate or connect or whatever else, physical and knowledge devices. So those are that's neat. The free education for all, also neat. But what would be the thing? Like the moonshot is on the one hand the vision. The vision is always simple. Something really simple that we all agree with.
Ubiquitous learn, really simple.
We'd like that.
Yeah.
But what's the simple googly type response? Like what are our balloons in the stratosphere?
That's a good question.
That'd be a good band, by the way. Yeah. That's my next band, is going to be balloons in the stratosphere.
Yeah.
It's going to be a folk band. Actually, it's just going to be harmonicas. I don't know how to play.
Should be a heavy metal band.
I don't even know how to play a harmonica. I just know how to make it make noise. A flute, recorder. I can do hot cross buns like a maniac on that thing.
I don't know. I mean, like, I have this thing in my mind, this completely distributed network of resources that you can tap into on a personalized basis, where these resources aren't simply a PDF on how to use a fishing rod, but actual interaction with other people using fishing rods, plugging you into fishing rod programs, accessing serialized courses. That's a nod to Matt. That sort of infrastructure, getting you engaged in the fishing rod community, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So basically, a fishing rod company would not just build a fishing rod; it would have to build this entire system around it that creates the fishing rod. That can teach you how to use it, but that connects people and does all those other things.
Well,
or would it be several companies?
But you can't ask a fishing rod company to build that.
Right.
That would be unreasonable. So the balloon part is you build that, and then the fishing rod company can use it along with everybody else with any interest in fishing. So I mean, what is the balloon part? It's the infrastructure part that by itself makes utterly no economic sense. Right? There is no business model for balloons floating over Africa.
There isn't, even though their view is there will be. Facebook isn't doing this because they're good people.
No.
Like they're doing this because it is a massive market that they want to extract profits from.
Yeah, almost a billion people. Yeah. With sitting on a ton of resources and generally a good climate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean Africa should be wealthy.
It should be. I mean, Africa should be. I mean, Brazil, Latin America should be wealthy.
Yeah.
Right. China's getting wealthy.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's parts of the world like Africa should be a tourist, natural resources.
Oh yeah.
Heaven.
Yeah.
And the climate in parts of it is stunning. The wildlife is amazing.
Yeah.
It's
And they can grow a tree in a week. Okay, maybe not a week, but I don't know how fast bamboo grows. Yeah,
fast.
Fast.
That's, do you want me to quickly Google this for you?
No, I think we're good.
I think George wants to Google it.
George's going to Google it anyways. So, and that's just it. I mean, like Google had this big audacious goal of being able to Google how fast a bamboo tree grows, and now we just know.
How fast does a bamboo?
We would know faster if we weren't relying on George.
That's true. Usually they grow 3 to 5 feet in height per year. That's nothing. I want them to grow way faster.
Yeah, really.
Evolution sucked on this one.
My spruce tree was growing a foot per year. I mean, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, no kidding. Bamboo gets all this false attention of,
Yeah.
oh, you're so fast. You suck, bamboo.
Yeah, really. So those like that form of execution where they tie you to a bamboo tree and then the tree grows and gradually, that actually takes months to happen.
Sounds painful.
It sounds like, how do you feed them or?
Oh, okay, here's where it gets fun. Certain species of bamboo can grow 3 feet within a 24-hour period.
Okay.
That changes everything.
That changes everything.
Like, why is this bamboo garden site? Why would you lead with the least? Like, that's hard to lead with the thing that surprises.
Yeah.
All right.
So there you go. And now that would work as an execution method.
That would, yeah. I mean, alternatively, just shoot them.
Yeah. Which would also work, but doesn't use the natural abilities of bamboo.
You could probably fashion it into some kind of poisonous dart type weapon.
But and the thing with, even with Google, and this is, we haven't talked about personal learning at all yet. And even Google can't get you to those things that are exactly what you need. And I think about that, like, I think that that's relevant. Now, do I know that that's relevant? That's a harder question. But I'm sorry. But I think it is. And we also haven't talked, and you mentioned it earlier, and then we just never came back to it, personal graph, which is a concept that we were working with on LPSS. I don't think it will be part of LPSS in the future, but I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. But again, even this idea of having your own personal learning record and all of that, and having that somehow inform your access to this global grid of learning resources. So I think there's an infrastructure of balloons underlying this concept of ubiquitous learning.
Well, and it's, I guess, one of the things that's interesting, like when I look at what we have now, like I'm getting to, it's not 100% there, but I'm starting to think like we've maybe had all the good ideas that are needed for education reform.
Yeah.
What we haven't had is a good implementation.
Terrible implementation.
So, you look back and we can point to Dewey and we can point to Freire and we can point to Illich. We look back at Vygotsky and whoever else, and even great religious leaders and so on. So philosophers, like we have had all the good learning ideas.
Yeah.
The issue is our implementation has been rather poor, and as a result of that, we haven't seen sort of the change that was needed.
Yeah.
And what'll happen, so if you look at tool sets that have made a big difference educationally. Nowadays, at least, are things like Clever, like the, I think it's the sign-on thing or whatever, that's huge in the K-12 space, K-12 space. Or there's simple tool sets. LMSs took 15 years of tortured suffering for them to get broadly adopted. And they had to be sold more often than not to state or provincial level leaders who didn't understand the learning process, because an average teacher would look at it and say, well, this kind of is dumb.
Yeah, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Why would we buy this?
Yeah, that was
But you're right, yeah.
So I guess that's the point is it's part of the implementation. That's the thing that I find so interesting is ubiquitous learning, ubiquitous internet coverage for Africa or whatever else the problems are that we're facing. The moonshot isn't in the idea anymore. The moonshot is in the implementation of a solution.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Even like Google's moonshot of organizing the world's information. Well, talk to any librarian. They've been doing that for thousands of years.
Yeah.
All Google,
pretty well too.
Actually, they really have. I mean, yeah, it's been the Dewey system was a little biased toward Western culture and relegated the rest of the world to just one little section of it. But still, there was a way of classifying the world's knowledge reasonably effectively. Google came by and they did what librarians have been doing. And we like to talk about Google like the big thing they did was the search engine and stuff. But people were building search engines before then too. Yeah. They just managed to take, and it wasn't even their own idea. They took Garfield's impact factor for journals, and they took this idea of the impact of a link, and that's. So I guess that's what I'm still thinking is if our big moonshot is education for all or access for all or whatever
something
else,
like that,
then
Whose idea do we steal?
it's the idea we've all had there. That we got to steal the implementation.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can't steal it because nobody's done it.
Yeah.
So you can steal the idea, but implement it better.
Yeah.
That's probably exactly what our problem was with CCK08.
Yeah.
The idea was stolen, and we think that it's the idea they took, but it's actually the implementation they took, or that they excelled at.
Yeah.
I'm still going to bitch about it, but that's really what happened.
Start the Reclaim the MOOC movement.
Well, there is a point to that. I mean, we could probably come back with MOOCs that are, even like the idea of the serialized MOOC, right? Come back with something like that. So, yeah, you guys can do this, but look at what we've got now.
MOOC 3.0.
But the trick there, even that, I mean, again, for me, it all comes back to, there's the network part of that. The other part is build quickly and being able to pull that off, which I think is doable. But
all right, so that's one thing. What else would you have for like moonshotty type things?
Moonshotty.
We're butchering the English language today.
Yes. Moonshotty things. Global worldwide simultaneous translation, but I think someone else is working on that. We come back to personal learning records things, right? The whole idea of, it's like the Neil Stevenson, book that teaches you. Except it's not just a book that teaches you; it's your lifelong companion. That's a computer book. I think the basis is there in the idea of the personal learning record, personal graph, and all of that. Personal analytics. I'm looking for a phrase that isn't quite there, but the quantified self, that sort of thing. Again, we're beginning to see implementations of that. But all of these implementations are platform-based in the sense that you and 100,000 other people use the same application. Like we'll all use Runkeeper, say. And Runkeeper will run collaborative filtering and recommendation or whatever on that. And the data belongs to Runkeeper. All the analytics belong to Runkeeper. It'll take your data, run analytics, and then sell it back to you. It's kind of like the academic publishing model.
It is. It's a terrific model. I was saying that because I've heard of some LMSs now that will, in structure, for example, you buy access to your data.
Yeah.
Right. So it's your data with your students running on a platform that you paid for. But if you want it, you got to buy it back.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, anyone, we can have issues with companies like Elsevier, but if anyone is able to do that, you got to give them credit for just pure brazen
Gall.
and unfortunately, you got to give us credit for not stepping up soon enough.
Yeah.
Like, let me get this straight. I'm going to write an article on my time.
Right.
I'm going to submit it to your journal. You're going to have my peers review it for free.
Yeah. And the editor of your journal won't be paid either.
You won't be paid either. And then they're going to publish this article. And then if I want my students to read it, I have to buy it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that
And
that
it's
came
not
about
cheap.
was incredible. And
I know.
I mean, you couldn't write something that insanely, amazingly, whatever it is.
And yet they're doing it again with personal data.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it worked well the first time.
Yeah. So if we can personalize personal data so that you begin by owning it, and then you can sell it to them.
Well, sort of what Matt was saying earlier with our dual layer MOOC is this idea that if your default is structure, then it's almost this idea between opt-in versus opt-out, right? If you have to opt in to alternative structure, you're going to have far less users use it than if it's an opt-out model. All right, but still, let's go personal learning graph.
Just as an aside on the opt-in, opt-out, that was one of my experiences with working with OpenEdX. Is it's really easy to have them start by creating an account in OpenEdX, and then you access that. It's really hard to start by creating an account outside OpenEdX and then signing into a course. In fact, you can't do it that way.
We've been running lots of problems with that, trying to get edX to work with other systems.
Yeah.
Through single sign-on or whatever. It's just like, or even regular edX. It's just like,
We were able to make it work, but basically the first week was constant frustrations for people that wanted to move out, and at the end you're like, screw it.
oh yeah, it's open.
Anyhow, sorry.
So no, I was just going to say something that I forgot.
Yeah, I know.
Personal learning graphs.
Oh yeah, thanks. What would it look like? Like, here's how I've described it. I'd like to see your vision on it, but like it's basically a lifelong record of what you've learned. It should include more than just what you know knowledge-wise. I think there should be, and it should be continually updated so you can get both process and states. But I'd love to see something like that come out of it that has that consistency of identity. It should be learner-owned. It can't be owned by a software company or an institution. You should have the option of different providers that allow you to host it on their system. So because you're going to be security issues and so on, but it should be yours. Again, lifelong. So you could, even though there might be limited value of going back to really anything pre-high school, even high school would be, I would say at a certain stage you want to purge that as well. But let's say that
if you own it, who cares, right?
That's what you can
You're not
decide.
going to share your data with anyone unless.
Because you could create maybe like a subgraph and say, here are the pertinent skills to, if I want to get this job or I want to work with this organization, then I put this together. Here's the subgraph at mattcrossland.com / job interview today, or, then put a subgraph, say somewhere else like that.
Yeah, I mean, that it's the ability, in some ways, a little bit like what happened with the e-portfolio movement, which is where you have all your content and you can reveal parts of your portfolio based on the kind of job you're getting. The one difference with this is that it needs to be, as to a certain level, parts of it need to be automated. Like, it should be able to say, I publish an article in a journal. It should be able to mine that. Like, Google Scholar finds out what I've published. There should be a way to mine that in such a way that I don't have to, like, yes, you need to manually update your graph, but it shouldn't be a key criteria. There should also be a way for universities to write into your graph with your permission what you know. And then there should be a trend, like I've said before, privacy is a transactional entity. It's a trend. It's like money, right? I don't pay $120 for a hamburger because I know it's a crap exchange. Whereas with our data, we're giving Facebook everything because we have no sense of what the value is of that transactional relationship. But it should be like if university says, George, you're joining our year as a freshman here. You give us access to this data, we'll be able to provide these personalized services for you. Is this something that you would find relevant? So then I start to understand the transactional nature of that exchange. And it goes when I go into the labor market, I come back after I've worked for a while, my job changes. So instead of now getting a new bachelor's or post-baccalaureate or whatever, I can, and taking 2 years or 4 years to do it, I could do it maybe in 3 months because it knows what I know.
Exactly.
Part I've added manually, part has been mined, and then I've been able to, nobody should write into your system without you describing, but what would it look like for you?
So, spinning me. There we go. So one thing is, I think that the very same network that provides this distributed access to content and services is the network that does all of these personal analytic services. So, and I think putting them together like that achieves a lot of efficiencies. So basically, we're talking about a personal system that accesses resources, but also accesses and manages our personal learning record. That's what I was after with LPSS. Now, it's interesting. So some of the phrasing you used in terms of using phrases like subgraph and things like that, I see it as a graph, literally as a graph. And there are different kinds of graphs. And this is where I ran into some issues with some of our developers. But and like in the simplest rendition, a graph can be thought of as a set of, if you, well, I don't even want to say it that way. I mean, one way of doing it is the graph can be thought of as a large set of triples as an XAPI, where, and that's it, right? And then you might run analytics on that and associate them. Or when I see a graph, I see not a set of triples, but a set of objects. And you run your analytics on it, and you're drawing relations between the objects. And again, part of the place where I ran into issues with developers is, and this harkens back to the talk, right? I think that the relations between objects should be associative as opposed to semantical. And if you're running a graph database, like say Niels 4J, and that the mechanisms are semantically based. They're building relations between objects using, for example, k-nearest neighbor or whatever, which is based on the properties of the object, or more accurately, the values of the properties of the object. And I think that's a useful thing to be able to do, but I don't think that that's the thing that should define the associations between entities in the graph. I think that these associations should be created through practice, through the actual things that you do, as opposed to the content or properties of the objects. Couldn't solve that.
Yeah.
They were not interested.
See, I wonder how you, I mean, like the short view is there are certain things that you know that are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would, and I should say I have a meeting in 5 minutes, which is also inevitable, but it'll be short, but well, about a 30-minute meeting. And then actually probably what I'll do is I'll give you a ride to the airport, or I'm getting ready to go. I'll give you a ride to your hotel.
Trying to get rid of me already.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll give you a ride to the hotel right after that, so you can have a bit of downtime.
All right.
Dinner. Anyway, so there's a few things I look at and I'm like, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And it's just a matter of what's it going to look like. So one of the things that I think is going to be inevitable is you will get to see something, might be 5 years or 10 years, not much longer though, but you're going to see something that is like a learning graph that includes our learning over life, that is used by education institutions to adapt, and you can do a degree in shorter time frame or whatever else. So I think that's just, there's no other way. Like
learning record stores already exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where you're like, how could it be anything else? And this is something that Kaufman writes about, you know, the evolutionary biologist, is this idea of adjacent possible. And the basic point is that things advance to a point, and then there are things adjacent to it that are possible. They weren't possible back here,
Yeah.
right? Like you look at what's happened with neural learning or deep learning or those kinds of things. There was a time where it was just not a thing. I mean, you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Romhart and Cleland and others. It was just, there was nothing happening with this.
One of the objections was you would have to build a computer the size of a city.
Yeah, and so essentially what ended up happening with this whole process is you had a guy by the name of, I mean, there's others doing this. It was the winter, the AI winter, where there was not a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And that was partially because at that point it was actually, I think, Papert and what's the other guy, Minsky that had crapped all over the idea of network. They wanted representational models rather than sort of network models.
Yeah.
And we went there because they were so influential. The NSF killed funding in that area.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, one of the individuals that was advancing network models of that ended up committing suicide on a lake, I believe it was. Just, but anyway, so because Minsky and Papert had basically
Rosenblatt?
I think that could have been.
Yeah.
I could Google it if I cared that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sad that he died, so I do care.
Yeah.
But the point is that we stayed there for the longest time. So the idea of neural network models of learning and machine or artificial intelligence models based on deep learning, deep network model. It was, the idea was there, but computationally it wasn't there. And then all of a sudden, Gregory Hinton out of University of Toronto came by, and even though others as colleagues didn't pay a whole ton of attention to him, and all of a sudden he could demonstrate the ability of software to recognize things.
Hinton and Anderson.
And then everything blew up. And right now, these machine learning guys are making super sports star salaries. I mean, they're hiring them for millions plus a year. Hinton is still a faculty member at Toronto, but everything that's happening, even the guy that started Udacity, Coursera, Andrew Ning, he was picked up by one of the Chinese search companies. Because so the point is, you can be early, and you can be, but that's as bad as being wrong.
Yeah, I know.
But even then, we could tell that this is where it was going to go. So that's the thing I look at. Is we're at the same place now. We know this is going to happen.
Yeah.
We just don't know how it's going to cash out.
But we know it's going to happen.
I think it's just, and we know that once it happens, it'll
that's
be very
the thing with personal. The history of the personal graph is like the history of AI, right? It's like we've got these representationalist models of it, and it's all going to be about what content do you know?
Yeah.
And even now, that's what's being funded, right? But really, it's not going to be about the content. It's going to be how do you associate the contents? How do you, like, here are the things you've been exposed to. Here are the people you've been exposed to. The ideas, the places. How are these all associated? Can your personal graph form a reasonable emulation of your own cognitive state?
And more than just cognitive state, it has to include process things.
Yeah.
It has to include strategy and goal setting, and it has to include, social networks, the networks that the knowledge that you have access to as a byproduct.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it may be 20 years before we get there.
I hope it's a little quicker, but yeah, you're right. It could well be.
Well, we're going to go through this whole representationalist period. Well,
Not at all cynical.
I've just been through that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Well, that's why I think there's a real lesson for people who are driving change and trying to evaluate the influence of technology and understanding what happened with AI and then the impact that Hinton, who plugged away at this, like he went
for decades.
He went and being, for lack of a better word, borderline mocked and ridiculed by the field, to all of the sudden it's like, oh, you are now the person that Sergey and Larry call when they have questions.
Yeah.
Because and the funny thing with software, by the way, let me just dig this up here. I tweeted this a while ago. I just want to get this resource out because it's such a really, 51 minutes worth of really important learning time was, where is this crap now? I'm spread all over the place. It was this view of analytics, and it was a really, there it is. It's called The Secret Rules of Modern Living Algorithm. So I tweeted that out a while ago. And it basically gave a very low-level access to analytics or algorithms, how they're working now.
Secret rules.
Here, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Just because you have to, it's a pain to find. It's on YouTube, but it doesn't give you the whole screen image when it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you actually have to get it through, I got it through Daily Motion website. And what I liked about it was it introduced algorithms without it appearing to be so mind-numbingly complex. And even did simple things, like, and you'll appreciate this. It had simple illustrations of sorting mechanisms, bubble sorting, and so on. Just really
I think
nice.
I've actually seen this, but I don't think I've seen the video. And I'm seeing here it's on BBC. So.
That's not the one you want. Unfortunately, BBC doesn't let you. It's BBC produced, so I sent it to you now.
Right. Okay.
It's BBC produced, but
the BBC.
And then on YouTube, the video's on YouTube, but the way they've set it up, you lose like half of it from the top, and the video is just not complete. So the email I sent you has the whole thing. If anybody's online, I'm sure you're excited to troll my Twitter stream, but it's April 15th is when I tweeted out that particular link. But what I liked about it was it made algorithms accessible and understandable in a really simple way, and it demystified it.
I'm curious to see that because, again, remember, these algorithms we think we operate by aren't actually the algorithms that we operate by.
Right. But the thing is, whether the algorithms are efficient and effective and representative or not. The cameraman died.
Cameraman down. Cameraman down.
He fell over. Anyway.
Yeah.
Bob, are you okay? Bob seems to be all right.
Bob seems to be all right.
He recovers quick.
Yes,
I've noticed that from before.
That's because he's Microsoft Bob.
Paperclip.
Yeah, anyhow, I'm gonna have a look at that for sure.
Yeah, so that's, anyway, I know there was a point I was making and I got distracted, but it's something related to the fact that you gotta recognize that technology is sometimes beyond what culture will accept.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the processes themselves are wrong. And I think you can feel, even people who were aware, it is a function of computational advancements, but the idea of representational models of AI versus associationist models of AI, you could just sit and think and realize after a while, representation models simply can't scale in level with the data that's coming in.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing that's very clear is human beings can't understand the scope of data that's coming in.
Yeah.
So now with some algorithmic approaches, this is the part that is maybe a little disconcerting, is we actually don't know how these systems are training themselves. Like the final conclusion in the video, they've got this huge ass grocery store.
True.
Yeah, and so how do you evaluate the logistics of that? It was, anyway.
Well, and I think that's a good point. I mean, this is, it's the sort of thing that we would encounter. We look at what is training and even cultural development. What does that look like in a large organization, like, say, the government of Canada? And the answer is something along the lines of, well, we have no idea. How can we know this? And, we can approach individual people with individual learning goals or things like that, but trying to comprehend the system as a whole. But again, if you're trying to do that as a representational system, it's just, I mean, from my perspective, the amount of content and the number of rules that you need to have going all at once, it's what they call a combinatorial explosion. And every time you increase, the set of possibilities by one, you have an exponential increase in the number of rules you need to deal with that. So,
well, that's the shortest path algorithm. Sort of looks at that. If you have three, like, there's a traveling salesman problem that I don't think has been optimally solved yet, but it's this, which coincidentally is worth thinking about too, is in the algorithms video that I mentioned, what they actually found inspiration in was setting up, because basically the thing is, if you've got 3 cities and people use how many combinations, you add another one, and it's exactly that. You get to an exponential point.
Yeah.
You go from like 60 or to 600 to all of a sudden you're at 1.2 million simply by adding a few extra nodes.
Yeah, yeah.
So they actually did those bumblebees. They put a bunch of these things out there and they watched how bumblebees hit all of these things for pollen to return to the queen. And that's where they're finding their inspiration in some of these evolutionary biological
And the answer
models.
is you don't program the system. You program simple bumblebees and let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And there is no logic of how the system does it.
Well, and that's, I think, the thing that is mind-numbing to understand with machine learning is that algorithms will figure out things that we don't know how they figured them out.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly. Machine learning models, not algorithms.
Yeah.
Because there's a slight difference there, because basically machine learning systems write their own algorithms that we don't understand.
Well, I think there is literally not a how they figured it out. I mean, there is not literally an answer to that question. It's like, how did you recognize your grandmother? Oh, well, she was the one with the gray hair. No, I mean, that's a stupid answer. There literally isn't an answer to how, it's just that it was well, as I say, it's a recognition thing. Your system snaps to attention. Oh, that's her. It gives direct perception. It's just you saw her as your grandmother, and in this case, it's the bumblebee hive scene as an environment, right? But design a system like that. Get people, trying to describe a system like that. And again, this is the problem I'm having with LPSS, or was having, I guess, past tense now, is describe a system like that for modeling. Well, modeling's the wrong word, but a person's knowledge, right? Their personal graph. The first question someone asks, and I can picture them across the table asking it, well, how does it work? Right. What is the algorithm that it is using in order to say this person is the person you should talk to answer this question? And because my answer was there is no answer to that question, set up the system properly and the right answer will come out. That is why I no longer have a position.
Well, this is good. Not really.
It's not helpful. But that's, when we talk about moonshots, that's in the back of my mind. Yeah. So, but somebody had said, well, how are you going to get to the moon? If somebody had answered, well, there is literally no answer to that question, I guess it wouldn't be a moonshot.
True.
But on the other hand, Kennedy could say, we will put this problem to a nation of scientists and engineers, and they will find the answer to it.
Yeah.
That was okay.
Well, what's interesting too, though, is that it's the simplest things. This gets back to the earlier point, and I guess we'll probably wrap up here soon. But it gets back to the interesting idea with solving, defining the moonshot. The magic is in the simple idea that does the most good. Nothing, it'll never be perfect. There'll always be someone who has a right to say this didn't hit the mark, and they'll be right.
And they'll be right.
But it'll have hit more of the mark than if you hadn't done it at all. So with Google search, for example, there was a lot of companies out there employing really complex systems for, Alta Vista and Yahoo, and they didn't work. Or they worked, but they didn't work like Google did. So Google cut through the chase and got to what is the important thing.
Well, the important thing was PageRank, and not the content of the pages.
That's right. The thing they discovered was that what mattered was the link. Mm-hmm. The connection is what mattered, and because the content will always change. And then, but the big problem is, so you have that issue. You realize that, but then all of a sudden you say, well, the traveling salesman problem kicks in, where now you've got so many nodes, and each time if we all link, and then we're all connected in some way. So if I get downgraded with my PageRank, then that has to reflect. If I've linked to your site, that's got to be updated and
And
updated.
you have a constant cycle of upgrading or downgrading page ranks.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, any other random thoughts, Matt? Anything going on in your head? Nothing going on.
No, sometimes you just go.
I think there's probably there's enough common ground in what we're thinking here to find something that we can do that would be an interesting project.
And that will be the focus of tomorrow, I guess.
It will be. So for you two viewers who are online,
You might believe is Autumn Canes, since she's the only one tweeting about it.
Oh, okay.
okay,
So we'll say hi to Autumn.
Hi, Autumn.
hi Autumn, and the one other mystery viewer.
Hi,
We're up
mystery
to
viewer.
3 viewers now. So I always wonder.
See, with each new viewer, they all lose their level of specialness, right?
They do, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
If we had 300 viewers, we would not be saying hi Autumn.
No, exactly.
So maybe it's better that we only have 3 viewers.
I like how you rationalize.
Hey, I'm a person who ran a radio station for many years and will start it up again with 0 listeners. I can rationalize anything.
I hear you.
I'm proud of my radio station. So, okay, so anyhow, yeah, we'll wrap it up for today, I guess. Got
All right.
Meeting to do, which you're probably late for.
I am, but they haven't replied yet, so I'll give you a ride.
Okay,
Does 6 o'clock work instead of 5:30?
sure.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking is I just realized that I have a meeting that runs 5 to 6.
Oh, okay.
So I could do the meeting at dinner while I'm reading chips and salsa, but that's not.
It's really not really the way it's done.
All right.
So,
All right, 6 o'clock. Thank you.
all right.
I'll probably be in the hotel earlier, just streaming it because it's easier there than anywhere else, so I can get there quicker.
So, bye viewers, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
All righty.
And the closing shot is like the fridge. That's what Bob's giving us to close out.
Thanks, Bob.